interference here, but welcome to the Poets Corner. I'm just thrilled to be hosting today's reading. My name is Meg Weston, and I'm co-founder of the Poets Corner along with my dear friend, Catherine Seitz. Catherine, can you wave? Show people who you are. This is the second anniversary of the Poets Corner. We founded it in June of 2020 to create community around writers and readers of poetry and short prose. And we have hosted more than 24 events. We've hosted an event every Sunday on the second Sunday of the month. And sometimes we've done more, and sometimes I don't think we've skipped a month. So it's been a wonderful adventure to meet poets and meet all of you and give people an opportunity to read. And this year, for the very first time, we ran a chapbook contest, and most of you know that. And I want to say a very special thanks to my friend Jim Zimprich, who I believe is on. Jim, if you might just say hello and people can see who you are. I'm not hearing him. There he is.
Here I am.
Hi, Jim.
Hello, hello.
Thank you so much. Jim was very generous in helping to sponsor this chapbook contest this year and give us the opportunity to grant a $1,000 prize to the winner and have an incredible judge, Naomi Shihab Nye, for this first ever chapbook contest. So thank you so much, Jim, for making it all possible. I don't think Jim is a poet unless he's been hiding that from me, but I know his son was a poet and that poetry is near and dear to his heart as well. So thanks, Jim.
Well, I am not a poet, but I enjoy reading and listening to it.
Great, great. Well, I hope you enjoy today because it's an exciting day. And I want to thank Maine Media Workshops in College for partnering with Poets Corner to be able to bring us this chapbook contest and for bringing us Richard Bright Smith, who's the chair of the book arts program at Maine Media and the studio manager for the Charles Altschul book arts studio there. And Richard designed and printed and assembled the chapbook, and you'll hear more from him a little later in our program. I want to tell you about a couple of upcoming events on the Poets Corner. In July, on July 10th, we will have a reading with the finalists from the chapbook contest. So there are, I believe, 7, there were 10 finalists, of which Jeffrey Bean was the winner. And so 7 out of the remaining finalists will be reading on the July 10th event. So I hope you will register and come back for that very special event. Every one of those chapbooks was wonderful to read. And I do have to say that I apologize, the website was down today, a special anniversary present from Network Solutions, I think. And I hope to have it back up tomorrow when I can get a hold of their tech support and get the website running. And then this reading is being recorded and will be on the website, as well as a way to register for upcoming readings, the July 10th event with our finalists. And then in August, we're partnering with the Farnsworth Art Museum in Rockland to do a special reading that is centered around the Ashley Bryan exhibit, because Ashley Bryan is being honored with their Art in America Award at the Farnsworth. Unfortunately, he recently passed, but he knew about this honor. And we have 2 poets from Maine, one of whom was a good friend of Ashley's, Carl Little, who will be reading poetry at the museum, and another who is the poet laureate of Portland, Maine, that Maya Williams, who will be reading and talking about Ashley Bryan. And if you haven't seen the exhibit, I believe it's online. I went to see it in person. It is truly amazing. It just so happens that when we had our reading last month with Naomi, she talked about Ashley Bryan being a friend, which surprised me. It's wonderful. But we will have an open mic at the event. It's an in-person event for people that write poems in response to the exhibition. So I'm hoping that we'll get people there to register to read at the open mic. I'll be hosting the open mic for them. And although it won't be online for all of you, I hope it will be recorded, and I'll let you know more about that. And then in September, on September 11th, Ellen Bass is giving a reading called Black Coffee, a conversation with Ellen Bass. So those three events are very exciting. I hope you'll come back for those. But at this point, I want to get on with today's event, and I want to introduce our host for today's event, the wonderful judge of our first ever Chapbook Contest, Naomi Shihab Nye. And I don't think she needs an introduction to anybody on here, but I will make it very brief because she has so much work out there to explore, as well as podcasts and videos on YouTube, and a wonderful PBS special that was on recently. She describes herself as a wandering poet who has spent more than 40 years traveling the country, and she leads writing workshops and has published more than 30 books. So there's, I can't tell you where to begin, but so many of you know so many of her poems. And for me personally, when I was president of Maine Media Workshops in college, and I retired in January of 2020, but for 8 years, I welcomed students every Sunday night to come in for their workshops. And I would start every Sunday night with a poem. I'd ask them to be quiet, close their eyes if they'd like, and just listen to kind of set the stage for the week and think about what they wanted out of the week. And I have to say, so many times I read a poem by Naomi because her poems just spoke to that creativity and that inspiration. And I have found your work inspiring for so many years, and I'm thrilled. So I don't want to talk anymore. I want to turn it over to you. Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you so much, Meg. And thank you for founding this wonderful Poets Corner with Catherine 2 years ago. I feel that during the COVID era, we have needed corners of poetry in all of our days to help us feel sustained and connected. And thank you for the one you have offered to so many people already in 2 years. Very grateful to you. Thank you also, James or Jim. I can't remember if she referred to you as Jim, for your support for the programming here. And that means so much to people who write poetry, that there are other people who just appreciate it and want to share it and support it. That means so much. And then thank you to Richard. We're excited to hear from him in a moment. But the star of this day is Jeffrey Bean. And I am so excited to speak from my very inner city 105-degree home in San Antonio, Texas, all the way up to Michigan, and think about how poetry connects us across state lines, age lines, boundary lines of any kind. And just salute you, Jeffrey, for the joy you gave to me when I was reading these marvelous chapbook manuscripts. And by the way, I'm so excited to hear that Poets Corner is sponsoring a finalist reading, as you well should, because your finalists were so terrific and so original and so different from one another. So that will be another great event. But Jeffrey Bean, what happened to me reading through these wonderful manuscripts was the joy that I believe it was Emily Dickinson described as having your head come off or the top of your head start sailing through the air. I remember hearing that first when I was about 7 years old and being fascinated by it, because already I could tell that hearing or reading a poem that resonated with your own soul in some way was an instantly transformative experience. And I was so excited as a child that something like poetry existed, which could allow us to feel that. I certainly also felt it with music, with looking at art, with seeing a dance performance, but poetry was more portable. You could be with it on your own in a corner. You didn't need special staging, special lights. It was like a private art experience. And when I read Ella's Plan, your winning chapbook, I just felt my entire little room that I'm sitting in zoom off the block. I just flew into the stratosphere with joy, because there was no question that your book was the winner. And it's so exciting when even a single poem can do that for us, when we feel suddenly taken out of ourselves, taken into another place, offered a refreshing perspective, reminded of something precious that we may have forgotten about during the drudgery of our own days. And Ella's Plan just had that sort of magic in it. When our own son was little, he used to go out into the neighborhood and take a little paper bag and put leaves and pollen and little stones he would find, a random feather, and he would call these his potion bags. And he would bring them home, and sometimes he would just line them up in the windowsill. And other times he would take everything out and lay the individual items in the windowsill. Sometimes he would actually take a pot of water and pour everything into the water and see which things would be affected by water and which things wouldn't. He was always doing different things with the ingredients in the potion bag. And I remember feeling such a reverence for this experience as simply the chaperone on the walks and the person who could see what he did with his collections when he came home. I felt the same magic about Ella's Plan. I felt you took details, scenes, voices, objects, windows, light, perspectives, memories, dreams. You took all these things. You created these short, potent images that were utterly mesmerizing. And when that happens in a poem, it is like the ultimate alchemy of spirit. You just feel so stirred, so widened, so opened up to what you're reading, and everything changes. So I felt about your book that you had transporting power. You had the ability to give us this original, gorgeous, eccentric, creative, precious, tender child, her view. I felt close to her as my own memories of being a distracted daydreamer in class and often being sent out of the room or to the office for such behaviors has always been with me in my many, many years of working around the world in thousands of classrooms. I sort of look for that person who's staring out the window. And I often think, that's my poet. That's the person I really want to be with in this class, the one who doesn't really want to be here. And I felt your respect for Ella, your awareness of presence. And I have like a wild notation to myself about the poem Ella in the Classroom. So I hope you will read that one. But I really loved everything in your book. I felt I had never read a more chilling poem than the poem about the babysitter. I hope you'll also read that one, because I think so many people have had experiences that are very, very difficult to articulate. And what you did in this book, what you do in this book is nothing short of magic, Jeffrey. So I'm very excited that you have a name that for some reason is so easy for me to remember. Sometimes I have a hard time with trying to tell someone else about, you should read this book by so-and-so, and I can only remember their first name. But you've been a legend in my mind because your name just really grabs me too, since I first read your poems. So I would like to congratulate you, celebrate you. All of us applaud your work, and we can't wait to hear it. What will you tell us today about Ella's plan, how this book came to be, and anything you would like to share?
Oh, Naomi, thank you so much. I need to recover from that amazing introduction, just so warm and smart. And I'm overwhelmed with the sense that I'm just so grateful to you for understanding the book so thoroughly, and understanding Ella so thoroughly. I feel like Ella feels seen by you, and I loved what you said about the potions. Was that your son that did
that? Was our son, yes.
Yeah.
His son also does it, but it was kind of more our son's thing.
Well, and I did it too when I was a kid.
Wow.
That's the same kind of thing. The potions, although I think I sometimes used like deadly chemicals to make potions that were sort of unsafe. But other times I would just mix together stuff I found out on the ground, like with water, just like your son did. I love that about the potions. And that is a metaphor for the Ella poems too, because I felt like that is a similar kind of thing I was doing with these poems, going out and finding those, making those potions out of.
Yes. Yes.
I love it. There's so many things I want to respond to. But I just need to say thank you so much for being here and hosting this event too. It's a huge honor to share this afternoon with you and to have you here. So thank you for doing that. And I also I've been also overwhelmed looking at the people who have joined this call. So many people that I love are on this call. People from my childhood, people from college, from after college, from graduate school, from my life now in Michigan, friends, family, colleagues, students especially. There's so many of my amazing students on this. They answered the call. I emailed them and said, oh, it would mean so much if you came to this reading. One of my all-time favorite poets, Naomi Shihab Nye, is hosting it. You have to get to know Naomi and you have to be at this reading. And they're coming even from Germany, like Jess, who is tuning in from Germany even while she's studying abroad, and so many others. Thank you all so much for being here. It's overwhelming, the gratitude I feel right now. So thank you. And it's all just like a really amazing dream, this whole thing, because I'm a huge Naomi Shihab Nye fan. And I was telling Naomi before we started the call, I've been a fan of her work for close to 30 years now. I figured it out, it was the year 1995, and I was a senior in high school, in my creative writing class in high school. Remembering that I didn't actually read the poem. Oh, and by the way, am I coming through okay? You can hear me, I'm not breaking up or anything?
You just froze up for a minute on my
Okay, yeah,
screen,
I
but
just
you came
got
right back.
I got a thing that said my connection was unstable. So I'm
But you
back
came
now.
back. You came
I'm back
back.
now.
You
Okay,
came
good. I'm
back.
back. I'm back. But I was saying, I encountered her poem "Valentine for Earnest Man," which I saw her read in a video. It was a Bill Moyers program, and this was the '90s, so our teacher had to wheel in the big media cart with the big boxy TV and pop in the VHS tape and wind it up and showed us this video. And there was Naomi reading this poem, and this was early on in the semester. So this was one of the very first contemporary poems that I encountered in that class. And I hadn't read much contemporary poetry before then. And that poem, Valentine for Earnest Man, instantly lodged itself, especially the first line, just instantly lodged itself in my memory. You can't order a poem like you order a taco. That first line of the poem just has stayed with me all these years, and it'll just pop up into my memory just randomly. Maybe if I'm struggling to write a poem, it'll say, you can't just order a poem like you order a taco. And I'll think of that line. But that whole poem is really about being a poet and what it takes to be a poet, to develop the habit of mind that we need to be poets, which is to be open to the poems in the world around us and to be transforming the stuff that we observe in our lives into poems. That's a poem really about that. And it had a big influence on me when I heard that poem. And I thought, I have a memory of thinking, sitting in that classroom in 1995, thinking, I think this is what I want to do. I think I want to write poems when I saw Naomi reading that. So just to have all these years later to finally get to meet her and to have her select this chapbook for this prize, and to have all of you here, if the internet holds up, it's going to be one of the best days of my life. So thank you all so much. Thanks also to Meg Weston and Catherine Seitz for their wonderful work with the Poets Corner. Meg has been wonderful to correspond with, and they have some fabulous events they've already hosted, more fabulous events on the horizon. So be sure to follow them and check out all their offerings. And a huge thank you of this chapbook, Richard Reitz Smith, who I was lucky to get a contributor's copy here. More on the way, but I got this advanced copy, and I am just totally blown away by the design of this book, the flaps, and just the text, the font, the quality of the paper. It's just, I know Naomi has one too. It's just a beautiful object to behold and to hold and to touch. And even if you don't read the words, yeah, Naomi does the cool thing where she combines the flaps. That's so cool. But it's, even if you don't read the words, it's just a wonderful object to behold. So I'm so grateful to Richard for his incredible work in designing this. Okay, so I'm gonna read you some poems now. I had more to say than usual because I had to tell you all about my history with being a huge Naomi fan. I think I'll begin at the beginning. And by the way, I'm going to read the poems that Naomi mentioned. I had planned to read those poems already. But I'm going to start at the very first poem in the chapbook, which I think is a good introduction to Ella, who there's not much really to say beyond the fact that you may have already gathered. Ella is a child, and every poem in the book is focused on the point of view of this child. She's an invented character, a fictional character. And she's partly me as a kid, for sure. There's that stuff you were saying, Naomi, about being the kid in the classroom, gazing out the window. That was definitely me, and that certainly comes through in the poems. It's partly my daughter. I have a 12-year-old daughter. Some of her childhood is in these poems. And it's also just kind of kids in general, other kids I've observed. She's an amalgamation of a lot of kids, but also Ella is just her own person too. She kind of took on a life of her own. So this is a good introduction to her, this first poem. It's called It Is Friday Night. It is Friday night across the whole Midwest. Ella senses the fathers are half drunk, clanging in garages, and the brothers are mean-grinned beneath high school bleachers, the stars above them invisible in stadium lights. Ella has come alone to the train tracks because she knows things grown-ups don't know or have forgotten, and she needs the quiet, the smell of creosote to think. about how roots are upside down trees hidden underground, how light so alive it can stop a heart courses through wires that connect our houses together, how her body leaves cells in a swirl behind her, marking the world where she walks, how catching a bird with salt on its tail is a grandmother's lie. But what they don't tell you is a kid can become a bird just by looking hard enough at the trees, where right now the robins and blue jays are asleep, curled on themselves like shut tight eyelids. Ella's wings are awkward, but strong enough to lift her, and her feathers are clean and smell like snow. She flaps until she's over the graveyard at the edge of town. If her mother came looking, she would find Ella, a purple night bird, perched on a marble headstone, listening to the dead dream of what they had and ignored when they were alive. The tang of mint, the sound of a violin, the birds that were everywhere, everywhere around them. Okay, so second, I think I'll read the second poem, How Ella Knows. Ella's hands know she's alive today. Her piano is drenched in sunlight, and she spends the morning coaxing hums from its belly. She has made a pet of the wind, and she lets it in through the screen door, feeds it dried blooms from a rhododendron. She thinks about all the mirrors in the houses on her block. Then she crosses the street to her neighbor's yellow door, peers through the mail slot. It's dark in there, and all she sees is a stack of blue plates on a table. Where are the secret drawers filled with cigarettes and diaries? Where are the boxes of pliers and hammers, the screws flexing their tiny shoulders, the needles and gum? When a spider drifts up toward the ceiling, the afternoon stops moving. Ella stares for a long time. Then she blinks and the leaves go back to sizzling. Okay, I'm glancing at the chat. Thank you guys so much. Great stuff in the chat. I can't read it now. I can't read the chat now. I'll read it later. So Naomi mentioned this poem, this next poem I'm going to read, which, you know, it's been a wonderful thing in working on this project, these Ella poems, to revisit my own childhood through the poems. But sometimes being a kid is terrifying. There's a lot of trauma that can happen, of course, in childhood. You're very vulnerable when you're a child. And when I was, you know, I worked on this project for about 5 years off and on the Ella sequence of poems. And this was the last poem I wrote for the chapbook. And there was a voice saying, you have to write this poem. You have. Okay, I'll write this poem. And I remember writing this poem and sort of, it was almost like I was annoyed. I was like, had to write it, but it was one of the closest, I think, to feeling like I was just taking dictation, like the voice was sort of coming through me and I was just copying down what it said. But this poem deals with some very real trauma from my own childhood. And that comes through in the poem, you'll hear about it. So this is Truths. The truth is, Ella wants to be a night animal, a fox, a possum. After short, hard summer rains, she dips her hand like a snout into the wet blades of daylilies after dark, rooting for morsels to nourish her. The truth is, Ella hums herself to sleep. She haunts windows every afternoon, longs to follow the beautiful old women who wear their hair long and walk trails through tall grass in the park. The truth is, every morning, Ella is a catfish, warm on the bottom of a muddy pond, sunlight cutting through pleasant murk to sparkle on her tail. Her whiskers twitch when she smells something delicious. The truth is, Ella's babysitter turned on her with a disgusted sneer as soon as her parents went out the door. The truth is, she pulled Ella's hair, smacked her mouth when she slouched in front of a black and white movie on the sofa. The truth is, afterwards, she announced it was time for a spanking, that Ella had better get ready for a spanking. The truth is that first, the sitter made Ella pull down her shorts. The truth is, her shorts were yellow with Snoopy on them. Her underwear was blue, and she had to pull it down too, so the sitter could hit bare skin. The truth is, the sitter hit her and kicked her in the thigh when she scratched a bug bite, leaving a bruise the shape of a butterfly. The truth is, her parents didn't believe her. The sitter brightened, smiled when they came in the room. The truth is, Ella was not angry. She had imagined so much, told her parents so many dreamed things. She did not blame them for thinking the hitting was another dream. And so the sitter came back the next day. Ella cried and locked herself in her room and fell asleep beneath her red bedspread. The babysitter found a screwdriver, opened the locked doorknob that way. But when she peeled back the blankets, anger bubbling in her voice, she found that Ella was a puff of pollen in a lily. Ella was the sizzle of bee wings. Ella was an elegant cursive name on the front of a bright envelope, carried in a bundle of mail into the air above the sea. So there was trauma in childhood, but there's also, some wonderful goofiness and joy and exuberance and playfulness. And I wanted to capture some of that in some of the poems too. And I think that comes through, that spirit comes through a little bit in this next one I'm going to read, which is called Hush. And this one is also a tip of the cap to the old children's song nursery rhyme that goes, hush, little baby, don't you cry, or sorry, hush, little baby, don't say a word, mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird. That song, it sort of plays around with that. Hush. Ella's going to give you a looking glass, a kite, a day full of shimmering water. Ella's going to give you a real horse for your imaginary barn, the mayor, an entire meadow fizzing with bugs. Ella's going to give you flowers, red juice. She's going to give you the sound of a doorbell, the creak and gurgle of a rowboat oar, fast wind through a screen door. She's going to give you a tornado's green sky, a tiny bustling highway for your pocket, a white moth so huge you can ride it upside down above the bedrooms of people you love. Ella's going to give you a way to find those peaches you ate and those long gone summers, the pink buzz of those evenings, that full feeling, or at least that stickiness, that cricket song, those houses next door, their windows spilling sunlight on their floors. Okay, so dedicating this one to Naomi. This is Ella in the classroom, which she talked about. Ella in the classroom. Ella spins the globe until the continents blur. She wants a country with a wild shoreline where the national language is color and people walk the streets in silence, holding up cards with pink or orange or blue shapes to greet or shout or buy things. At lunch, Ella eats only seeds from raspberry jam. One day she faints of hunger, and when she wakes, the whole class surrounds her with their soothing faces. Tomorrow, she will tell them her secrets, the shortcuts through the cornfields, the stash of licorice in the tire swing, the creek behind her house brimming with salamanders and geodes. Inside the geodes, purple crystals gleam like buildings in a capital city. Inside the buildings, little citizens face the windows and glow. Thanks, Naomi. Thank you all so much too. I'm seeing love pouring in on the chat, but again, a little overwhelming to look at it now. I will take it. Keep it coming though. I'll enjoy it later.
May I insert something, Jeffrey?
Please do. Please
Yes,
do.
I noticed that my old friend Marie just put in, my senses are popping all over the place. I love that. And so many people have had exclamatory, captivating, wow responses. And you know, one thing I love about these poems is how, if any of you were in English classes as high school students, where a teacher may have told you can only have one or two images in a poem, and then you have to develop that metaphor and you can't throw other ones in. And I remember always wanting to bring in like Ferlinghetti, Walt Whitman poems with vast collections of so many images. Well, you defy that. You defy that idea that you can only have one, and each image somehow becomes richer because of the context, the mixing of what you give us in the landscape of the poem. I mean, I feel like every poem is a gorgeous weaving of elements, colors, images. I love that she wants the colors to be the dominant feature. You feel this sense of love for this child and knowing of this child. You know, maybe it's that wild part of each one of us, that renegade outcast of each one of us, that most observant, creative, boundlessly wise, tiny person that we try to keep alive inside of each of us. But I feel, look at that, someone's head is truly flying off. See, it wasn't just a dream I had after being alone for so many days. It was a true thing. And that pleasure, that joy of poetry, you know, I think you're giving us a sense as we hear you read these wondrous poems of how poetry is so intimate, because Ella is a very intimate character whom we're identifying with or following through the poems. But you're also having a sense of collective response, or like, I know that person too. I have my potion on my desk. See what Pam wrote later when you read the chat about what's on her desk. That sense of knowing and richness. You have given us kind of an every child, but a very singular, intimate one child. And that's what we love about poetry. Somebody's talking about an event, and it can be translated into our own experience as, well, my event was similar, but it resonates and it allows us to see our own event. So I've written down all kinds of things on little old hotel pads that I used to collect when I traveled constantly. I have like 100 of them in the back corner of my desk. And so I would write things. I found this just this morning when I was thinking about your work, Jeffrey. And I had written at some time during the past 2 years, poetry wants to help us. It's not something you learn and master. It's a continual process of discovery. It's a means for putting pieces together. Did you feel that the character Ella kept doing this for you? Like helping you, putting pieces together, suggesting her own images? Could you just talk a little bit about that, how the poems actually came into being?
Yes, I think that's a great way to put it, that Ella was helping me. I love that poetry helps us. I definitely had that sense, and I haven't articulated it like that. And first, I just want to say, will you please come to all of my readings and do this? This is what you just said was so wonderful and so smart. And it really, it helps me see these poems in a different way and understand them better. But that's such a perfect way to put it, that Ella was sort of leading me to different things and helping me see things. And, one thing that I found as I wrote these poems is I was taking from my own childhood, like I said, but a lot of times I realized I wasn't thinking chronologically. I wasn't like, what was it like to be a 7-year-old or a 9-year-old, or what was it like in 6th grade or 1986 or whatever? It was spatially. I would think of a place, and Ella would guide me to that place. Like I would write the poems by sort of picturing her in a place somewhere. A lot of times it was up late at night in bed. I realized that as I was looking through this and preparing for the reading, there are a lot of poems where she's sort of lying in bed. I'll read one in a minute, but sort of lying in bed and listening to the night and looking out the window at night. And I did that a lot as a kid. I was a night owl and an insomniac from an early age. But also places like the train tracks that I mentioned in the first poem, or the classroom. There is often, I would think of place, even if the place was really small, like digging around in the dirt underneath a spruce tree in the backyard or whatever. But I love that Ella would lead me to places. And in the poem Truths, I had that feeling. Like I said, it was almost like Ella was telling me I had to write that poem. It really felt like that. And I was ignoring her for a long time. I guess I was scared to sort of bring that up. Or I thought, oh, it would be sort of, I don't know, like no one wants to hear about that trauma, or kind of a thing. But of course, and when it came out, I realized it was a poem that was necessary for the project. But I love that. And also everything you're saying about having a bunch of images and mixing them together. It's that metaphor you said at the beginning, the potion metaphor. I have never thought of that before, and that's such a perfect metaphor to describe what I was up to in these poems without realizing it. But I wanted to get as much of the world as I could pack into the small space of each of these poems. And that was the way I felt as a kid. I wanted to see and taste and feel as much as the world as I could. And I'm often overwhelmed in big cities because I feel like I take in so much around me, and I like living in my small town in Michigan, not so much input, because I always feel like I'm sort of naturally, which can lead to some anxiety, taking in too much, but I'm sort of naturally prone to doing that. And I feel like in these poems, I wanted to pack as much of the world in as I could, and as much of Ella's world as I could.
I have to say, Jeffrey, you did pack us so much in of this world, and it feels like a dream world. But that poem, The Truth, that one just wakes you up, by having it in that different tone in the middle of this book. It just wakes you up. It's wonderful.
Thank you. That's a great way to say it, Meg. Thank you so much.
I love hearing just the word wakes, because I think Ella is so awake that we feel awakened by just following you through her imagination. Were you in Michigan as a child too, Jeffrey?
No, I was not. That's a good question. I was a similar landscape, though. I grew up in southern Indiana, which is different than Michigan, where I am in some ways, but definitely similar landscapes. Like I went to graduate school, for example, in Alabama, and the landscape there felt very foreign to my childhood, even though there were a lot of interesting things about the landscape there and beautiful things. I lived in Portland, Oregon for a while. That was a totally different landscape. That was like a temperate rainforest. That's like another world. And you'd go hiking and come to a gorge where there would be a sign that said, there's a kind of orchid that lives in this gorge that only exists here in this space and nowhere else. That was a very fertile and strange and interesting landscape. And I got some inspiration from it. But this is definitely, the Michigan landscape feels a lot like the landscape of my childhood, even though it's a few hundred miles away from where I grew up.
Maybe it made it easier to remember and imagine Ella. Would you read us the poem you mentioned about being in bed at night?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So that poem is called Ella's Nocturne. That's the one that I had picked to read. There was a couple others, I think, that made it in the chapbook. And I wrote a bunch of other bed poems where she's sort of lying in bed that didn't make it in. But I'll read this one, Ella's Nocturne. Little spark of insomnia caught inside Ella, like a red bird stunned to find itself in a kitchen after flying through an open window, wanting the cool air of a new forest, but finding instead a strange panic for the brightness outside. In her bed sheets, Ella gleams, rolled up inside her comforter like a fork in a fancy restaurant. The night stands up, a tall dinner guest, his green hair billowing, teeth sparkling in his dark mouth. Every crawling creature on the block points its shining eyes at Ella. She is a bug child, a once flying thing, stuck in an old web a spider forgot, the stickiness not unpleasant. Slowly, she melts on the tongue of the moon, a kid, a lozenge, wild and purple.
Oh, a lozenge.
I know.
That's terrific. I know somebody's going to write about that in the chat.
Yeah.
Do you read your poems out loud to yourself when you're writing?
Not, sometimes yes, and sometimes no, I guess. I always read them out loud before I send them out.
Right.
I always read them out loud when I'm revising. In the actual first flush of inspiration, when I'm writing the first draft, sometimes yes and sometimes no. But I'm very sensitive to the sounds of words. I actually started as a musician long before I was a poet. I was a very committed musician, and that's what I always thought I was going to do, like in high school.
What was your instrument?
Jazz guitar.
Wow.
And yeah, I went,
Wow.
some of my friends from college have known me in that life. I feel like that was a different me, a different life. Some of the ones who are tuned in right now. But I was in high school, my goal was to be a professional musician, and I pretty much ignored the rest of my studies and focused on music. And I went to the Oberlin Conservatory, which was a very serious conservatory. A lot of my friends from there are now professional musicians, some of them very famous, like Rhiannon Giddens, if you know that wonderful musician.
Are you kidding?
No,
I'm obsessed with Rhiannon Giddens.
Me too. And let
She's
me quickly,
my number one.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Really?
I don't believe this. Yes, I'm obsessed. I probably listened to her every day for the last 2 years.
I'm totally obsessed with her too. And I have to immediately say, I do not know her at all. She was in my class though, at Oberlin, in my class. And later I discovered her, and she's one of my all-time favorites too. The Carolina Chocolate Drops are one of my favorite bands.
Amazing singer.
Amazing. And I discovered slowly she had been in my class at Oberlin, and Oberlin's pretty small. And I thought, how did I not meet her? How did I never know her? And I read an interview with her that said, in college, I was just an opera nerd, and all I did was hang out with other opera people, and I never met anybody else. And I thought, well, that explains it. I didn't really know the opera folks. So she was sort of in a different group than I was, but she was there, and a lot of other ones too. So it was a very serious, wonderful conservatory. But I sort of realized halfway through that I was not, I didn't want to be a professional musician. That life wasn't for me. But I had this other love now, writing, which I started to discover when I first discovered your work, my senior year. And I should also say I grew up around writers. My parents are both writers. They're tuned in right now too. And my dad has an MFA in poetry from the Iowa Writers Workshop that he got in the 60s.
Wow.
He builds violins and he writes songs, and he's an oil painter, but also a poet. Are we freezing up again?
You went away, but you came back.
But I'm back now. Okay, I'm back. I got the warning again. So I tried to go to the fast internet, but it didn't work. But my mom is a wonderful writer, a fiction writer, and she taught creative writing for many years at DePaul College in Greencastle, Indiana. So I grew up around writing, and I grew up around writers, but I was like, that's my parents' thing when I was younger, and I met some writers and was around it a lot, but I really wanted to be a musician. But that senior year, when I took that creative writing class, that's when I really started to realize, well, I love poetry too. And I discovered the jazz poetry anthology edited by Yusuf Komanyaka and Sasha Feinstein. That had a really big influence on me, because it got me to think, I have, or I can love poetry, and poetry can do some of the same things that music can for me, and can excite me in some of the same ways, and be just as dynamic and musical as music can be, as jazz can be. So, and I feel like in this book, it's really the image is taking primacy. You know, like you were saying, it's more sort of image-driven poems, but some of my other work is much more attuned to sound. But I'm always thinking of poetry as an out loud art form, and you know, something that I hear it as I write it, even if I don't read it out loud.
I do feel music is very, very present in these poems. And thank you for telling us that history. It's fascinating. Also, salutations to your parents. I wish I could meet them too. And I hope I do someday. And congratulations for raising such a wonderful other writer. I think maybe, Jeffrey, I feel as if we could speak for probably 2 weeks. Maybe we should let Richard talk about creating the chapbook, and then come back and have you talk to us more at the end, and maybe read some more poems. Is that
Love
okay
it.
with everyone?
Sounds perfect.
That would be perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
Richard, you have created such a gorgeous book. Could you just tell us about these flaps and everything else?
Yes, Naomi. Can you see me here?
Yes.
I'm gonna pin me or spotlight me for everyone. Thank you. When Meg asked me to do this, I immediately said yes. And then I spent the next few months having so much anxiety waiting for the winning manuscript, about not knowing what it would be that I would design and how I would design it and who I would be designing for. I was just such a mess about the whole thing. And then I got the manuscript and I read it, and it was immediately this sigh of relief, because I knew it was going to design itself. And it was just me as a designer and an artist, letting Ella come forward in the pages and designing her world on these pages. And let me share the screen. And are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we
Yes.
are.
Okay, I'm not. Let me see if I can pull it to the front here. There we go. So I read through the manuscript and I was just mesmerized. And then I had to stop and catch my breath and then go back. And when I went back, I just made this list of all the visual things in Ella's world. And then I went back and looked at the poems and started thinking about the typography. What personality do these letter forms want to take on? Does it want to be going from the left-hand side of the screen? Does it want to be a sans serif, a very light, thin line, or a bolder sans serif in the second one, or a serif font in the next three options? And at that point, I spoke with Jeffrey. I had some ideas that I was considering, and I spoke with Jeffrey and sent him some options, and he was all on board, go for it. And I was, just thrilled. And so I had this concept of a children's book, a primer, a nursery rhyme, fairy tales, of books that I had when I was a kid. So I went and I just took that list of visuals and started scanning these copyright-free images, old Victorian engravings. And then I put them together into this end sheet. This isn't a traditional book where you have a hardcover and then end sheets and then you lead into it. So I really wanted to make this a special chapbook. So I gave it a longer cover so that the ends could fold in, and these in a sense act as a blueprint. And that's sort of, it's a blueprint in purple. And I was sort of pulling from Ella's inspiration of colors of pink and purple and thinking, what might a little girl like, what colors? And those colors were very much present in the manuscript. So I really tried to pull from them. And I really wanted some of the things that I do when I design is I like surprise, and I like that, on the outside, it's very simple and dark and mysterious, and you open it up and it becomes this entrance into this fantasy world of all these visual things that make up Ella's plan, and she's going to tell us about. And then I go into the nitty-gritty mechanicals of how to print this book. And I started, thinking about the press size, the paper size, and how big I could make the book, or should it be a small book? And I settled on, printing 2 sheets of paper, both sides. So you get basically 32 pages, and then you have some blank, and you have a title page. And so then I'm starting to lay out the poems and thinking about the order, as they're going into the book and how it's all going to be printed and folded up. And then I start doing the math of it all. How many sheets of paper do I need to buy? What is the budget that we have? How can I maximize the paper? And thinking about the size and how many sheets of paper can I get how many books can I get per sheets of paper? And that's a very important step. And who would have thought that an artist and designer has to deal with math, but it comes in very handy. And then we sort of had it all designed, and I was sitting and thinking about it, and I'm like, it feels like it might need a little bit more visual inside, not just on the ends, the end sheets, but carried throughout. Wouldn't that be a nice little thing if we sort of follow these traces of Ella's tracks? Is Ella a bird? Is Ella a girl? There was very much mystery to me. And so I started taking I collect things, my little potions. I have a bird's nest. And then I was able to translate it into letterpress leaves and seeds. And as you page through, there's these tracks of a bird that sort of lead you through the manuscript and the pages. And then I go into the production of it. So I have to make negatives in order to make the plates. And then I do press proofs to make sure everything's spelled correctly and none of the letters are broken and everything's printing correctly. And so I printed the cover first because it was the simplest, actually. It's one-sided printing, and it's printed in a silver ink on this beautiful aubergine paper. And here's the setup of the imposition on the letterpress in the main media studio. The purple ink with the photopolymer plates on the set up on the Vandercook. and again, a closer look at the, it prints in reverse. So when you put the paper down, this is printing here. I don't know if you're seeing my cursor or not, but you print somewhat upside down and in reverse. And then making sure that all the folds are correctly and the page numbers are going to line up. One of the interesting things I did design-wise is I wanted the text to be very bottom heavy. I was thinking of a children's drawing, and children's drawings are almost always very oriented to the bottom of the page, and then they sort of grow up. Things grow up from the bottom of the page, and that's how I wanted these text blocks to sort of grow up from the bottom of the page as a child's orientation looking upward toward the world. And then the folding and assembling and binding. And there's the assembly of the logo for the Poets Corner Poetry Press. And that's the gist of it. It's taken a lot longer than 5 or 10 minutes, but it's been a great experience, and I too love the result, and I'm so thankful to Jeffrey for creating this manuscript, which I said just really designed itself, and I sort of tried to bring it to life through that.
Thank you so much, Richard. That is so exquisite to hear the process and to see these images you've shared with us, the details which you were juggling. And I'm fascinated by what you just said about placing the poems to the bottom toward the lower part of the page, because it's the child's view of looking up. That just gave me a complete shiver. It's so marvelous. And I'm also really fascinated to hear about your own anxiety or anticipation as you waited to see the winning manuscript. That's actually something I've never thought about in my life, what it must be like for the book creator of the book, if you know you're going to be the one making the book, but you haven't seen the selection yet. That could be a very delicate position to be in.
Yes.
So you have really opened our eyes to your process of your own art and what an art it is to do what you do. Thank you for sharing these images with us.
Thank you.
That was magnificent. We're all cheering and overwhelmed by the triumph. I would say the triumph of the beauty of this book.
It is a work of art. Somebody's asking if you can flip through it. And of course you can. Do you want to show your copy, Naomi?
Show my copy. Sure. Well, yes, I mean, so there's that front. Well, first of all, the beautiful cover. And then this incredible, I love seeing the background of this. And yes, all those things, the turtle, the bed, they just carry us into Ella's world in this very lovely front page. And I'm so glad you talked to us about the elements of the visuals inside, the arrows and this wonderful eggplant colored ink. I don't know if you want me to go to every page, but I want to show you, like, here's one where the poems are toward the bottom of the page. Also, that makes me think of a children's book where the words are often at the bottom of the page and then the pictures are at the top. But here it's our minds, our imagination, the spaciousness at the top. This is that incredible poem Jeffrey read, Truths, which is so powerful in its physicality and then some more. So it is just gorgeously composed. I mean, every single spread is welcoming. So I hope that, yes, and people are writing, they love that it's reversed. The color of the ink is so wonderful. I was really interested in seeing how you selected the font too, which seems so wonderfully right.
Yeah, and I just want to chime in and say that I thought I didn't really care about font. Richard contacted me and said, okay, I'm thinking about a font, but I'm going to give you a few fonts and just see what you're drawn to. And I thought, I don't care what kind of font you make it in, as long as it's not some kind of fake cursive or something, just a basic font, whatever. But then I was very strongly drawn to particular font and fonts, and he had said he was thinking of the same ones, more or less. And I think it's is it the sans serif or
we chose serif. It's Century School Book, which is a traditional children's primer book.
My favorite font. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. I meant serif, not sans serif. Right. Yes, that's serif. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was just that was cool to even see that I had a preference for font, and apparently I do for this book. And also, Richard, I'm just so grateful that you documented that process so thoroughly. That was amazing to get to see that. I just blown away by the design, but then the process that's something I just know very little about, and it's fascinating. And I'm just so grateful for the care and the thought you put into this. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes,
I
it was
appreciate it.
very helpful to have the visuals to see your different stages. I'd like to invite anyone who might have a question for Richard, if you want to pop it into the chat. I'll try to transmit it. Or maybe, Richard, you're seeing it yourself right there before your eyes. You don't need me to transmit it. But we want to end up with Jeffrey maybe speaking more and reading a few more poems, and just telling me what Ella's doing when it's 105 degrees outside. I would like to know. And oh, here's a good question. Did you think, Richard, that this looked like a child's diary, the different entries?
That wasn't necessarily something that came to mind, but I think when you leave something open, people can interpret it in different ways, just like I interpreted a lot of the poems in different ways. I never really was sure if Ella was a girl or a ghost or a bird, but I love the ambiguity and the mystery of all of that.
And we have a question, what kind of paper?
Yes, the cover is a, it's in the colophon. It's aubergine. I believe it's a Nina paper cover, and then the pink paper. The text is a, I believe that it's a blush letterpress. I'm blanking on the manufacturer.
Nina again.
Nina again. Okay, both by Nina. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And one more question. What size did you choose and why? I guess like the
so it's a little bit larger than 8 by 6, and that was the largest I could make it given the press size that I had and the sheet of paper. So there was this balance of the size of the sheet that I could order to the size that I could print on the press. And then it folded down to this size. So it was a budget and economy and availability of paper. There's all these juggling factors.
I'd just like to say it is a limited edition of 250 of these, and that you can order them on the poetscorner.org website under shop. The website's not functioning today, but hopefully it'll be back up and running tomorrow at the latest Tuesday. So, I'd encourage people, if you're interested. I also just wanted to say that I worked with Richard to design a chapbook of my own. And it is just such a treat to work with you, Richard, as
Thank
a
you.
designer. And that is something that you do. I don't know, you do very many of them, but
When I can.
when you can. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard, for your most instructive and illuminating sharing of your work and your art, your
Oh,
process.
thank you. Thank you. And I
Well-
want to, if I can, I want to give a plug to Maine Media and the classes that we offer. We really do try to promote the book arts and making and printing of books and teach people how to make their own books.
There's one more question. How could people be in touch with you directly? Do you have a website?
Yes, somewhat. But the best is to reach me through Maine Media. I'm on the Book Arts website at Maine Media, rsmith@mainemedia.edu.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, Richard. And I too wanted to thank everyone who has attended today, but it means so much to have such a friendly group and to have your comments and your warmth toward everyone here. Thank you so much for being here. But we should end today, our last 10 minutes with Jeffrey's voice. And so Jeffrey, whatever you would like to read to us or tell us, we thank you, we congratulate you, and we'll be sticking around with Ella for a very long time.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Naomi. This has been one of the best days of my life. I think it's just been amazing. So, I'm kind of speechless. I'm feeling a little speechless. I think maybe what I'll do is read one last poem, and then just while we have 10 minutes, it's not much time, but if anyone has any questions for me, maybe I could give folks the chance to ask a question or two of me in the chat as well. So, oh, is there a question now?
Yes, there is. And
Yeah.
in fact, it's a question that I also had. So thank you,
Oh, good.
Dr. Eisenberg, for asking it. What does your daughter think of this book?
Well, she has not read the whole thing yet, but she's going to. She loves that it's dedicated to her. There's the little dedication page that says Olivia Marchbean. She is a wonderful reader, but as I think I was saying earlier, I can't remember if we were on with everybody yet or whether this was before we got started, but she sort of sees poetry right now as like, that's Dad's thing. And, you know, she knows I want her to be into it. So she's a little bit like rebellious and like, oh, maybe I'll read a poem. But the poems that she's heard, I have read, like, for example, I read to her Ella in the Classroom, and she just said, Dad, how did you think of all that? How did you think of a world where they only communicate by color? You know, she's sort of fascinated by it. So I think she's sort of slowly warming up to them, I think is the honest answer to that good question. But I hope that she will. This is kind of how it was, you know, as I said, my parents were writers, and that was sort of how I was, I think, with my parents writing. I came to really appreciate it more as I got older. And I think that's what she'll do, I hope. She's also coming around to music. She's got a very great ear for music, and she plays the flute. And finally, just this past week, I got her to learn a song that we played together, a jazz tune called St. Thomas by Sonny Rollins. And she played the melody on the flute, and I accompanied her on the guitar. And it was like a total thrill. And I was trying to play it cool. I was trying not to show her that it was so great, but she's getting into that kind of stuff. And then Meg asks, do you have any other readings planned? Any for young students? Oh, I should consider doing that. I do not have readings for children, but I should look into doing that. The next thing I really have on the horizon would be my fall faculty reading here at Central Michigan University for students, those are always well-attended events. But we have a new bookstore in our town, a brand new bookstore, which I want to support. We were without a bookstore for a while, which was some terrible years, but we now have a great one called Sleepy Dog Books. And I've gotten to know the owners well, and I think I'm going to try to do something with them and maybe travel around a little bit. I hope to read more from this book, but I haven't organized that yet, but I'm hoping to do that. So if
I
you want me
think-
to come read in your town, whoever you are out there, let me know and we'll make it happen.
I want you to read in our town. Come south, come straight south. We'll welcome you here. You know, I do think it's a good idea with this particular book to have readings that might be invitational to, say, junior high school age students or high school students, because I do think these poems are offering something that could really, really be appreciated by them, and that they may be changed by. So that would be a nice possibility. Also, since you mentioned Sonny Rollins and Monique has mentioned Sonny Rollins, I just want to make sure. I said I was going to be quiet. Look at me. I just talk.
I love
because
it.
I'm so
Talk as much
inspired
you
by
want.
you, Jeffrey. But if anyone likes Sonny Rollins and you haven't heard the fantastic interview with him by Paul Holdengraber on the Quarantine Tapes, just look up Quarantine Tapes, Google it, and it was sponsored by the Onassis Foundation, Los Angeles, and it's a terrific interview.
Wonderful. I do not know that one, and I have to immediately
Yeah, I'll put it up here.
look that up. And there's
And
a
there's
question.
another question
Yeah, I can answer
about
from
your mother's name.
Yeah, Anita asks, what is your mother's name, please? And when was she or has she been at DePauw teaching? So my mom's name is Barbara Bean. She has some wonderful work out there that you can find. And she taught, oh gosh, Mom, she's listening, I know, but I think it was from the late 80s to 2015. Is that about right? Don't know if she'll, oh, yeah, you're talking, hey, there are my parents.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, late 80s to 2015.
2011
Oh, 2011. I was
Yeah.
close. Yeah,
and 87.
nice.
Teaching creative writing.
1987 to 2011, I think. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course I learned enormous amounts from my parents, who are very smart about writing and wonderful people. And you know, I was listening actually to an interview with Ada Limon this morning on a podcast, and something through the Poetry Foundation, and she talked about how her mother is a painter, an oil painter, and that Ada was grateful to her parents because they showed her that a creative life was possible, and it was possible to choose art, that's something you could do, because not everybody has that option. And my parents definitely showed me that. So enormously, you know, I was going to be a musician and a poet, and they were just thoroughly encouraging the whole time. And not everyone has that. As I said, I feel very lucky for that. So, and yes, you can see the creative world behind my dad. He has a wonderful art studio there with, I keep saying wonderful, but I'm full of wonder. I just have to repeat that. But fabulous art studio with oil paintings and violins, and it was an inspiring place to grow up. So yeah, thank you for that question. I suppose I could just, maybe I'll read a last poem here. And then if there's a final question, you can be typing it if you want to ask me anything. I guess I want to say too, you know, it's always something, and it's too bad the website's down, but I really want people to have this book. It's just I'm so proud of it, and so proud of the amazing design Richard has done. Of course, so happy with Naomi choosing it. So don't forget, make a reminder for yourself to come back and buy it. And I don't know if we've said yet, I believe there are 50 signed copies as well. So you can get the first 50. I don't know how you're planning to do that, Meg, whether there's a way to get the signed copy or just the first orders will be signed.
That's a good question. I was sending some signed copies to some special people who had been our readers and our finalists. And then Main Media has a few reserved, but there will be some available that are signed. So I guess if somebody wants to email me at the Poets Corner with a special request, we'll do our best to fulfill them with the ones we have. Otherwise, they'll have to send them to you to be signed.
Yeah, and that's what thank you, Meg. And sorry to put you on the spot there. I just remembered that. And Deb says, will you sign them if we send them to you? Absolutely. Feel free to reach out to me. I will give you guys my email address. just my personal email. Would love to hear from anybody. I'll give you the Hotmail just for the novelty. Still holding on to the Hotmail. Oops, wait, I accidentally sent that to just one person. Hold on, I'll send that to everyone. Okay, yeah, so that's my email address, jeffperrinbean@hotmail.com. Feel free to reach out to me. There's another question that says, how did you find the courage to go with your heart poetry versus your head music? That's a great question because, oh, that was a direct message. Sorry, I just saw that. Well, Jay, I'm answering it for the group. It's a great question, but that was actually really hard. You know, I had established my identity as a musician, and making the change from music to poetry, people don't want you to do that. They know you. There was a lot of resistance when I would say, well, I'm not really devoted to music as much anymore. And they said, you can't give it up, you know, which I felt that too. It was hard. And I didn't totally give it up. I have continued to play music for fun, but I really kind of shifted after college. I changed to really wanting to write, and took a couple of years off between my undergrad and my MFA program, and ended up going to a fabulous MFA program at the University of Alabama. And oh yeah, and Daryl and the Beans, one of my students, we have a, some of my students are mentioning, I have a faculty band that we do for fun, that we raise money for a scholarship. And because 3 of the creative writers, myself and Robert Fanning, who I teach with, and Darren Doyle, beloved colleagues, they were musicians in their former lives too. And they, lots of Daryl and the Beans love coming in the chat. So we perform for the students, usually, like, it used to be once or twice a year, and then the pandemic hit, and we just did our first show in 2 years. And the students are very supportive of that. But we now have our music on, they want me to say, on Spotify and Apple Music. So you can listen to Daryl and the Beans, it's called, which is my band, which is purely for fun. And it's a delight, it's a joy to play music with those wonderful friends and colleagues, and they're great musicians too. It's, I mean, you know, we're writers first and musicians second. We're no Rhiannon Giddens, that's for sure. But we do have a lot of fun, so I do get to still play. But it was scary making that change, and but I feel like I really get a lot of the same fulfillment from writing that I got from music. So there's not, I don't feel like I regret it at all. And in fact, studying music was fabulous training for becoming a poet. Everybody who wants to be a poet should study some music. It helped me, especially when it got to form and prosody and meter and that sort of thing. It just translates really readily, music to poetry. So great. Some of my best memories from Oberlin. I listened to you jam. Oh, thank you, Molly. Thank you so much for being here. Well, why don't I close with a poem, and then I know it's about time to wrap up. So let me just read, I think I'll read the last poem, which is short. It's the final poem in the book. And it is the title poem as well, Ella's Plan. So spoiler alert, if you don't want to know the ending. Nah, it's not really giving away a lot, I don't think, to read this one. So this is Ella's Plan. I'll finish with this, and then we'll have some final words and wrap it up. Ella's Plan. She'll hold her hand out a window on a June day, snatch a chubby fistful of air, clutch it all night beneath her sheets. Out of a dream of flight, she'll emerge, vast as a yard of clover, and fall like a comforter over the neighborhood. Then she'll shimmer like a maple in the wind. You might catch a whiff of pine sweet air, that's her hair, but she'll never let you look right at her. She'll dart in your periphery, quick as a dining room mouse. Dusk, she'll gobble her handful of breeze and puff upward in pieces into the hot pink west. Thank you, everyone, so much. Is there a way for me to save the chat?
Yes, in the bottom corner there is.
I think I've got it.
Save chat. But I just want to say thank you so much, Jeffrey. I loved reading your poems, but hearing them, it's even more delightful. And Naomi, I don't know how to thank you for what you've done for us, for Jeffrey, for hosting today. Wonderful, wonderful event today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you all.
And again, Naomi, if you could come to all my readings and just interject every once in a while, that would
I'll
make
be
me so-
there. And if Richard could make all of our books.
I'll make everyone's chapbooks. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, oh my gosh, this, in a perfect
Yes.
world. every
This is our
week,
new
Naomi
family.
and They're reading.
We live in the Poets' Corner.
That's we're the
This
Poets'
is
Corner after all.
Ella's plan, right?
Yeah, this is Ella's plan, right? Ella did it. We did it.
To move to the
That's
Poets' Corner
perfect.
and live there
That's
for
the
eternity.
stuff. Oh, sorry. Say it again.
I said that was Ella's plan, to move to the Poets' Corner and live there in eternity, in the Eden of Poets' Corner. Sorry.
What a wonderful, wonderful event. Thank you so, so much. And thank you to everyone for coming.
Thank you all.